To be a Super Bowl winning franchise in the NFL, all the pieces have to be in the right place at the right time. You've got to have the right chemistry, the right coaching staff, a winning attitude, a little bit of luck, but most importantly, you've just got to straight up be good. Well, in the case of the 2007 New York Giants, they weren't that good. In fact, many pro football analysts label them as the worst team to ever play in the Super Bowl. Despite being a pretty subpar team on paper, let me tell you how the 2007 New York Giants ended up being one of the greatest Cinderella stories you've ever heard. Entering the 2007 NFL season, things were looking pretty abysmal, if I'm putting it nicely, for the New York Giants. They ended the previous season off with an even 8-8 record, despite starting the season off 6-2. Their head coach, Tom Coughlin, was feeling the heat up under his seat after failing to earn a playoff win in his first 3 years as a coach, despite having Hall of Famer Michael Strahan on his team, alongside first-team All-Pro players in Jeremy Shockey, Tiki Barber, Osi Umenyiora, and a couple other Pro Bowlers. Eli Manning was also slowly beginning to become considered a draft bust, considering the other QBs in his draft class such as Ben Roethlisberger, who had already won a Super Bowl, and Phillip Rivers, who led his team to a 14-2 record the previous season, were finding early success. Not to mention his older brother Peyton was coming fresh off of a Super Bowl victory from the previous season. Lastly, their first-team All-Pro running back, Tiki Barber, decided to retire at the young age of 31. Many believed it was time to blow things up all around the New York Giants organization, but ultimately, the Giants decided to keep things relatively identical for one more year. Tom Coughlin was extended for just one final year on the condition that he would build better relationships with his players and that he would control his fiery, raging outbursts. The Giants also brought in a brand new offensive and defensive coordinator, and despite many labeling Eli Manning's leadership abilities as, quote, almost comical, the Giants remained confident he could be the star they envisioned him to be when they traded for him in the 2004 NFL Draft. Starting off the 2007 NFL campaign, it seemed that all the comments and uncertainty from the sports world was coming to light. Key injuries to Eli Manning, Brandon Jacobs, and All-Pro Osi Umenyiora hit the Giants in Week 1. The defense gave up a total of 70 points within the first 2 weeks alone, and the Giants started the season off 0-2 for the first time since 1996. Many were already getting prepared to write the Giants off and put their season to a close. After just 2 games, it seemed that all the theories and speculations from the offseason were about to come true. In what was supposedly going to be one of the worst Giants seasons in the last decade, all was about to change in Week 3. Going against their division rival Washington Redskins, the Giants knew they needed to flip the switch and flip it fast. After a very shaky first half, they ended the first half trailing 17-3 to the then 2-0 Redskins in what should have ultimately been the end of Tom Coughlin, Eli Manning, and the Giants team as a whole. However, as we are about to see, this was not the case. Despite trailing 14 points at the start of the third, something happened in that locker room during halftime that gave the Giants new life. Coming out of halftime, the G-men ended up scoring 21 unanswered, carried by running back Ruben Drown's pair of touchdowns and Eli Manning's 33-yard touchdown connection to Plaxico Burress. With the game coming down to the wire, the Giants had the Redskins at 24-17, but only by a thread, as the Redskins had the Giants backed up to their own 1-yard line at 1st and goal with seconds to play. In what is now largely credited as the true heroic catalyst for the beginning of the great 2007 Giants season and what was to become, the defense somehow managed to create an impenetrable barricade and prevented the Redskins from punching it in from the 1-yard line on 4 downs of play, ultimately propelling the Giants to the win and sparking a turnaround for the ages. This heroic and triumphant comeback against the Redskins thrusted Big Blue to 5 more consecutive wins, bringing them to 6 straight wins since their 0-2 start, a feat they hadn't completed since 1994, and helped them win 10 of their last 13, heading into the final week of the regular season with a record of 10-5, clinching one of the last playoff spots in the NFC, meaning they would be a wild card playing on the road for the rest of the season. Heading into Week 17, the Giants were facing the 15-0 undefeated New England Patriots for what was the precursor to the Super Bowl in the coming months. The New England Patriots were then credited as one of the greatest teams of all time and were looking to become the only team to ever go 16-0. They were an absolute powerhouse, breaking numerous single-season records, and were led by 50 passing touchdown MVP quarterback Tom Brady and 23 receiving touchdown wide receiver Randy Moss. The game itself was an absolute battle, and despite taking the loss, the Giants had a lot to be proud of. They held the Patriots to their largest deficit of the season, holding a 28-16 lead in the third quarter, notched a league tie with having the smallest loss margin, losing by only 3 points, and were the team that put up the most points on the Patriots the entire season with 35. Even though Eli Manning had been sluggish all year, throwing a league-high 20 INTs, having a bottom 15 defense, and being plagued by injuries all year, the Giants were prepared to make an impact in the NFL postseason. Finishing the season off 10-4 despite an 0-2 start, being undefeated on the road since week 1 of the season, and almost beating the 16-0 powerhouse New England Patriots, the Giants had an underdog confidence unmatched by any team in NFL history and were ready to make some serious noise. Coming into the wildcard round, the 5-seeded Giants were matched up against the 4-seed Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Naturally, the Giants were the underdog and were expected to get knocked out of the wildcard round for the 3rd year in a row. Many were simply just waiting for that team to completely dismantle following that game, but the Giants had other plans. Despite trailing 7-0 and having -2 total yards on offense after the first quarter, the G-men regrouped and never looked back. They put up 24 unanswered points and finished off the day with a 24-14 victory. The past failures were now behind them, and Big Blue was rolling. Tom Coughlin got his first ever playoff win, as too did Eli, who played one of his best games all season. He threw for a season-high 74 completion percentage, to go along with 2 touchdowns and a very rare stat line of 0 INTs. The defense also showed up big time, causing 3 turnovers and halting a couple of definite scoring drives. Despite a solid performance against the Bucs in the wildcard round, no one was truly convinced that the Giants could get any farther. Matching up with the Cowboys in the divisional round, almost everyone had the Cowboys winning comfortably. The Cowboys themselves were pretty confident they could pull off the W, considering they went 2-0 in the season series versus the Giants.
It's brought to my attention that Jerry Jones had put 2 tickets to the NFC Championship game on each Cowboy player's stool.
However, like before, the Giants were ready to crash the party. The Giants got off to a quick start, taking a 7-0 lead, but it was short-lived, as the Cowboys scored 14 unanswered on multiple 90-plus yard drives towards the end of the half. The Giants had one more quick chance to even up the game at 14 apiece going into the half, and they executed. Coming out of the half, the Cowboys looked to do more of the same, as on their very first possession, they drove 62 yards downfield and ended on a field goal. But in reality, that was all she wrote for the Cowboys. All it took for the Giants was a touchdown early on in the fourth to close out America's team. The Big Blue defense came up big in the second half, allowing only 53 total yards after the field goal, and an interception in the dying seconds of the game sealed the win. Despite being major underdogs, having only 230 total yards, and having possession for only about 23 minutes of the game, the Giants managed to pull out another upset and were now heading to the NFC title game. Entering the NFC Championship, the Giants had garnered some attention from the public, but were considered even greater underdogs by analysts than in the divisional round. Opening the game off, the Giants kicked 2 field goals to take a 6-0 lead in the second. The ensuing Green Bay drive only took one play and resulted in a 90-yard Donald Driver touchdown from Brett Favre to give the Pack the lead. The Giants ended up getting shut out for the rest of the half, while the Packers tacked on another field goal. The following 3 drives all resulted in consecutive touchdowns, bringing the score to 20-17 for the Giants. The Packers then hit a field goal on the ensuing drive to knot up the game at 20 apiece. Despite fumbling the ball 5 times, the Giants managed to recover 4 of those balls and keep the game knotted. No other scores were made for the remainder of the quarter, even though Lawrence Tynes of the Giants had 2 field goal opportunities, including one in the dying moments, and ended up missing both. The game went to OT, where the Packers won the toss. It was do or die for the Giants, so when cornerback Corey Webster, who had previously given up the 90-yard Donald Driver touchdown, had a chance to make a play, he didn't disappoint. He intercepted Favre at the Green Bay 42, and 4 plays later, Lawrence Tynes had another chance to seal the game. Despite missing 2 potential game-winning field goals in the fourth quarter of the 3rd coldest game in NFL history, negative 23 degrees with the wind chill to be exact, 3rd time was the charm for Tynes as he sent the underdog New York Giants to the Super Bowl. Here they were, the once 0-2, should have been 0-3 New York Giants, who were on the brink of a complete rebuild, were competing for the honor of being recognized as the NFL's best team. Their opponents, the 18-0, practically immortal New England Patriots. The Giants were looking to be only the 2nd team in NFL history to have a 10-6 record or worse and win the Super Bowl. Who was the other team, you might ask? The 1988 San Francisco 49ers, who, unlike the Giants, were favorites to win their game, considering they had 6 Pro Bowlers, 4 All-Pro team members, the most valuable player of that season in Jerry Rice, and not to forget both Joe Montana and Steve Young at the helm. The Giants, on the other hand, only had 1 Pro Bowler from that season in Osi Umenyiora. To say the Giants were the underdogs in this game was as big of an understatement as you could put. This was a battle of David versus Goliath. Even though the Giants almost beat the Pats in Week 17, the Super Bowl was on a whole other level. Tom Brady had been here before, 3 times, alongside Bill Belichick, and at the time, had never lost. The team also had the league's best offense and defense, not to mention arguably the greatest offense in NFL history, and a vengeance after losing in the AFC Championship game from the previous year to the eventual champs, despite once holding an 18-point lead. So, to say the least, the Pats were pretty damn hungry. The Giants, on the other hand, hadn't won a Super Bowl since the 1990 season, had no playoff wins under Tom Coughlin and Eli Manning until this season, but they did have one thing: momentum and a nothing-to-lose mentality that brought them to the Super Bowl in the first place. The Giants did what they were supposed to do for that season, despite all the disbelief and more, with 1 game left to play to put the Cinderella season to a close. Opening the game, the Giants led a 16-play, 10-minute drive that opened the scoring with a field goal. Despite not getting the Big 7, as I'm sure they would have liked, putting 3 points on those 2007 New England Patriots, especially on the opening drive, was an accomplishment in and of itself. The league's best offense responded with a touchdown to take the lead at 7-3. Not much else happened in the first half, aside from a pretty common Eli Manning INT, a couple of fumbles from the Giants that could have very much changed the outcome of the game had they not recovered, and a rare Tom Brady fumble that prevented a Stephen Gostkowski field goal in the dying moments of the half. To start the half, the Patriots created a beautiful 9-minute, 14-play drive to the Giants' 31-yard line. In what is now looked at as a very questionable play, the Pats elected to go for it on 4th and 13 instead of taking a 48-yard field goal to likely put the Pats up 10-3, and instead ended up turning it over on downs. A couple drives later, the Giants penalized the Pats for not taking the 3 points and scored to take the lead at 10-7 with 11 minutes left to play in the fourth. In response, the Pats did nothing, and in response to that, neither did the Giants. With roughly 8 minutes to go in the last quarter of Super Bowl 42, the Patriots had the ball at their own 20-yard line, and in about 5 minutes drove down the field for a very common Randy Moss and Tom Brady touchdown connection to give the Pats the 14-10 lead with 2:42 left to play. Now, in most cases, giving the ball to a fourth-year quarterback who just threw for a league-high 20 INTs for the season, 56.1 completion percentage, and a pretty subpar 73.9 passer rating against the league's top defense shouldn't have been a problem. But in this case, the quarterback you were dealing with was Eli Manning. Although not nearly as good as Tom Brady or his brother Peyton, you could make the argument he was just as clutch, if not more clutch. With 2:42 to go, Eli was ready to shut all the haters and naysayers up. On the second set of downs, the Giants were already possibly looking at the end of their fairy tale season. After 2 incomplete passes and just a 9-yard gain, the Giants were at 4th and 1. Heroically, powerback Brandon Jacobs saved the day for the time being, but a lot more was still needed. After a 5-yard scramble and a near INT, the Giants were faced with 3rd and 5 on their own 44. In what is now widely regarded as one of the greatest plays in Super Bowl history, as the helmet catch, many look back at this play as the key setup for the Giants' win.
Pressure from Thomas off the edge. Eli Manning stays on his feet, airs it out down the field. It is caught by Tyree. Inside the 25 and a timeout taken.
3 plays later, on 3rd and 11, Eli was forced to be great once again and managed to complete a 12-yard pass to rookie Steve Smith to set up the Giants at 1st and 10 at the New England 13 with 39 seconds to play. And on the very next play, this happened.
39 seconds left. Manning lobs it. Burris alone. Touchdown, New York.
The Giants had the lead with half a minute to play, up 17-14, and were moments away from completing the greatest underdog story the NFL had ever seen. Like for most of the game, the Giants' defense held firm, and with time being on their side, the Giants managed to stun the godlike New England Patriots in what was the period to the final page of the final sentence of the NFL's greatest Cinderella story ever. Although being worse than Tom Brady in literally almost every statistical category for the season, Eli Manning outplayed Brady the entire game and took home the Super Bowl MVP honor. Concluding this game, he put all criticism and noise to rest about his leadership and quarterback abilities. Tom Coughlin was now a Super Bowl winning coach whose methods and spirit were no longer in question, and the once 0-2, almost 0-3, sure thing dumpster fire 2007 New York Giants were now Super Bowl champions.